I am Suresh Mony. I represent the country of India, and where I am director of Narsee Monjee Institute of Management Studies. In short, it's called NMIMS. I set up the Bangalore campus in 2008, and now we are in the 10th year of our existence in Bangalore. Although our university is more than 30 years old. I mean, the institute, the NMIMS Institute, is more than 30 years old. So I'm primarily an engineer by qualification. I did my metallurgical engineering from IIT Madras, and then I've done my management in finance, and then my doctorate also in finance. So I teach in the areas of strategy, corporate turnaround, leadership, and project management. You know, I am passionate about this topic, entrepreneurship and innovation. And when AMBA invited me to give a talk here, amongst the 4 topics, I chose this. Because I believe that we as educators have a big role to play in terms of creating jobs in society. With the advent of artificial intelligence, jobs are really being threatened. A World Bank research says that 69% of the jobs in India and over 70% of the jobs in China will be non-existent. Not in 50 to 100 years, but in the coming decade. Now, we must do something drastic. Otherwise, we could be in the throes of a human revolution. And it is small and medium enterprises that will really create more jobs per unit of capital invested. Now, the world before the 1800s, before 1820 to be exact, was really known as an entrepreneurial society, but everyone had small businesses, small enterprises. But with the advent of the large-scale enterprises, it became an employee society, and people started going for jobs. And it was fashionable to ask, whom do you work for? So you say, I work for GM or Ford or British Airways or what have you. But if jobs are going to become scarce, I think we need to have more enterprises. And who better than to create more enterprises? It should be those who have a business background. So the B school students should create more enterprises. And B school should be instrumental in that. But unfortunately, I think the current models of B school education are not tuned towards generating good entrepreneurs. One, for B schools, it's their mindset. The mindset is about creating graduates to serve the industry with an administration focus. And administrators are defined as those who are executives, those who execute jobs. But we don't want only people who can execute jobs. We need people who can create an enterprise, and that calls for different sets of skills. And if you look at the learning outcomes of B schools today, of some of the leading B schools, and it's more at the identify, apply, and at best analyze and evaluate level, but not at the create level. So there's something fundamentally wrong with the curricula, with the way we select our students, and with the way the pedagogy is executed. So the great MBA programs really generate or churn out graduates who are highly analytical, they can synthesize ideas, they can do well and manage businesses. But they are probably not the best for creating businesses. And I'm Stanford, I think, generates a lot of entrepreneurs. They have a different ecosystem. Babson might be having a different ecosystem, but they are outliers. I think the large multitude of programs are not tuned towards creating entrepreneurs. So they have depth and breadth in terms of churning out B school graduates who are analytically oriented. In fact, a recent study done on B schools by Srikant Datar, Garvin and Cullen, it talked about rethinking the MBA, because it said the MBA program as it is, although they're highly analytical oriented, they lack critical thinking skills. The MBAs lack critical thinking skills. So that's one of the shortcomings of the B school education. And for entrepreneurship, you require people with critical thinking skills and those who can work, can tolerate ambiguity, and who can create. That means they can generate value for the customer, capture value capture value. And how do you do that? I think the curricula and the pedagogy will have to be tuned towards helping students create value and generate value, which is not being done. So learning outcomes, to start with, I said it has to be at the highest level of creation. And it has to be, so that means the B schools will have to articulate. The strategic intent will have to be creating enterprise, and for that, creating innovative abilities in people. So that should be in terms of the learning outcomes. In terms of the pedagogy, it has to be more action-oriented. Our pedagogy is still more classroom-oriented. We'll have to have less of classroom and more of action orientation in terms of enabling students to observe, be apprentices, and go out in the market, make their own studies, make their own decisions, which will help them to create value proposition for the customer. So the action orientedness of the pedagogy will have to be far more than what it is today. Sadly, no. I think to become an entrepreneur, they are not being taught the skills. And that is why you will find that a recent survey said that in America, which has got a large number of schools, B schools, it's only 10.7% of the B school graduates set up their enterprise. And only 7% of them constituted, 7% of B school graduates were part of those who raised capital. So that doesn't speak well, or doesn't speak volumes for the B school education in terms of generating entrepreneurs. I think first of all, B schools must accept the fact that they're not doing a great job in terms of entrepreneurship education, and they must have a different organization for that. I said the mindset of B schools is really to train students for industry and really capture the low-hanging fruits, the job, and the students also are more job-oriented. And the fact that B schools are able to land them plum jobs in industry, I think the hunger and zeal is missing in students. So B schools have to have a different structure for entrepreneurship education. It should not, and for faculty, it should not be bound by the workload norms, the research output, etc., but by how they can create entrepreneurs. They have to handhold. They have to handhold the students along the way in terms of the action learning pedagogies and up to creating the enterprise. So it had to be an entirely different, it's a different ball game, it's a different kettle of fish. And it's just like, I gave the example of, you have a mature industry, you have a growth-oriented industry, and you have emerging business. The mindset is different for each of these things. The focus is different. One is short-term, one is medium-term, while emerging businesses, you have a much long-term orientation. The risk factor also is high in emerging businesses. The risk factor is low in mature businesses. So if you want to create entrepreneurs, the risk factors are more. You might not get as much success as you are getting in generating those service-oriented B school graduates for industry. So the risk and reward for faculty also has to be different. The organization has to be different, and the entire evaluation pattern has to be different. And secondly, most important is, how do you source the B school students? I think our current tests, whether it is the GMAT or any of the other tests, are good for selecting people who are analytically oriented, good for selecting people who can do synthesis of ideas, but they are not good for identifying people who are creative and who can be innovative. But that can be identified. The creative skills and the innovative skills can be identified and can be predicted. So those sort of tests will have to be used, and B schools will have to do that. Primarily, I think it should be de-linked from the MBA. The moment you have the MBA, you still have that mindset. You still have the administration focus. And you still is the low-hanging fruits. And you're still supplying to graduates to industry. But you call it a master's in entrepreneurship education. It has to be a distinct program. It should be, I think B school should develop a 2-year-long program for that, with a sufficient focus on the action learning part of it. Action learning for innovation, action learning for entrepreneurship. So it has to be de-linked from the conventional MBA. The conventional MBA supplies talent to industry for being executives. I think you need to have a different pool from which to get for entrepreneurship education. So that itself has to be, I believe, it has to be de-linked. You see, if you have a creative outlook in you, if you have innovative outlook ability, I think you will go for entrepreneurship education. See, those who come from business families, even if they do an MBA, after 1 or 2 years, they go back to their businesses, or they go back to setting up their own enterprise. So it's within their genes. So as I gave the example, you know, the attitude is formed, the abilities, the traits are formed at a very young age. So you have to capture, you have to select those students who have that ability from those predictive tests. And if you select the raw material properly, I think they will stick with entrepreneurship. But if you do not select the raw material properly, they will go for service orientation. So I think, so you might have a lower, today you have a large pool. You know, in India, if you want, those who enter B schools, it's a 1:100. That means from 100 students, you select one student. And everyone wants to get into a job. So for being an entrepreneur, I think the conversion ratio will be far lower. But I think the conversion will be much higher if you select the right raw material.